Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Thank you, devotees from Los Angeles. Seattle will start their contributions by presenting a devotee story, Sri Annamalai Swami. Presenter, Shashidhar J.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Sadguru Sri Annamalai Swami Namaha. Sri Annamalai Swami was born in 1906 in Tondankurichi, a small village of about 200 houses. After he was born, his father and another astrologer meet to discuss his horoscope. Both of them conclude that he was likely to become a sannyasi. Not pleased by the prediction, his father decides to avoid the possibility by denying him a proper education. However, he teaches himself to read. Even as a young boy, he displayed great vairagya. Once he asks his father, "Why are you doing this puja every day?" His father replies, "I want to get wealth, land, gold, and a lot of money." To which Annamalai Swami responds by saying, "These things are all perishable. Why are you praying for these perishable things?" In his youth, he establishes Sivaram Bhajan Mutt. When his father tries to get him married, he escapes to Chidambaram to become a sannyasi. He meets Shankaracharya of Kanchipuram, who gives him Upadesha and Sivaya Nama mantra to chant and write. In 1928, he receives a copy of Upadesa Undiyar from a wandering sadhu, which contains a photo of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. That night, he dreams of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi walking down the slopes of Arunachala Hill. He soon travels to Tiruvannamalai in search of Bhagavan. Upon reaching, he first takes blessings of Seshadri Swamigal. He arrives at Sri Ramana Ashramam and sees Bhagavan walking down the slopes of Arunachala Hill, his previous dream partly repeating itself. His request to stay at the ashram gets readily granted, and he begins serving as Bhagavan's attendant. Annamalai Swami's first spiritual conversation with Bhagavan. Annamalai Swami. How to avoid misery. Bhagavan. Know and always hold on to the self. Disregard the body and the mind. To identify with them is misery. Dive deep into the heart, the source of being and peace, and establish yourself there. Annamalai Swami. How to attain self-realization. Bhagavan. If you give up identifying with the body and meditate on the self, which you already are, you can attain self-realization. Annamalai Swami. Scientists have invented and produced aircrafts which travel at great speeds in the sky. Why do you not make and give us a spiritual aircraft in which we can quickly and easily cross over the sea of samsara? Bhagavan. The path of self-enquiry is the aircraft you need. It is direct, fast, and easy to use. You are already traveling very quickly towards realization. It is only because of your mind that it seems that there is no movement. In the olden days, when people first rode on trains, some of them believed that the trees and the countryside were moving and that the train was standing still. It is the same with you now. Your mind is making you believe that you are not moving towards self-realization. For the next 9 years, from 1928 to 1935, Bhagavan trusted Sri Annamalai Swami with various construction works at ashram, leaving him with almost no time for any traditional sadhana. Bhagavan also acknowledged that Annamalai Swami was an engineer in his past life. Annamalai Swami, along with Madhava Swami, helped Bhagwan with his bath, oil massage on the back and on the legs. At evenings, Annamalai Swami would also massage Bhagwan's feet with oil. On one occasion, when Annamalai Swami asked Bhagwan to select some reading material for him, Bhagwan gave a short list of 6 books: Kaivalya Navanitam, Ribu Gita, Ashtavakra Gita, Ellam Undre, Swarupa Saram, and Yoga Vasishta. One day, Madhava Swami asked Bhagwan, the people who take ganja experience some kind of ananda. What is the nature of this ananda? Is it the same ananda that the scriptures speak of? Bhagwan replied, eating ganja is a very bad habit. Then, laughing loudly, he came over to Annamalai Swami, hugged him, and called out, Ananda, Ananda. This is how these ganja taking people behave. It was a brief hug. Madhava Swami told later that he held Annamalai Swami tightly for about 2 minutes. After the first few seconds, Annamalai Swami completely lost awareness of his body and the world. Initially, there was a feeling of happiness and bliss, but this soon gave way to a state in which there were no feelings and no experiences. He did not lose consciousness. He just ceased to be aware of anything that was going on around him. He remained in this state for about 15 minutes. After this incident, he gets approval from Bhagwan to leave ashram and move to Pallakottu to live to live alone, meditate, and start his sadhana. After Bhagwan leaves his body, Sri Annamalai Swami undergoes intense sadhana, following the method of self-enquiry as instructed by Bhagwan. In his own words, when I moved to Pallakottu, I found it far easier to practice Bhagwan's teachings. After a few months of meditation in Pallakottu, my mind became relatively quiet and still. A wonderful coolness pervaded my body, and in the course of time, after many years of practice, both of these conditions became permanent. Many years later, he responds to a question by a devotee regarding his experience. Devotee: I want to ask Swamiji about his own experience. Was it a single event, an explosion of knowledge, or did it happen more gradually in a more subtle way? Sri Annamalai Swami: it was my experience that through continuous sadhana, I gradually relaxed into the self. It was a gradual process. For 50 years, Sri Annamalai Swami stays in the same house that was built by the grace of Bhagavan. For most of those years, he was unknown to the rest of the world, except for a few devotees from nearby areas who would come to visit him once in a while. He spent the years immersed in the bliss of the self. In the year 1995, on November 9th, around 4:45 a.m., Sri Annamalai Swami attains Mahasamadhi. He had remained conscious till the last breath. A great Jivan Mukta had left this earthly body to merge with Brahman. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Sadguru Sri Annamalai Swamiye Namaha.
Our next program is a song by devotee Sneha Sai Kumar.
Om Ramana, Om Ramana, Om Ramana, Om Ramana, Upanishad Vandya, Om Ramana, Upanishad Vandya, Om Ramana, Udhara Neela, Om Ramana, रमणा श्रीरामार्चित ॐ रमणा श्रीरामार्चित ॐ रमणा वररमणा 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 वरधा भयकर वररमणा वरधा भयकर वररमणा वाञ्छित फलदा वररमणा वाञ्छित फलदा वररमणा वाचामगोचर वररमणा वाचामगोचर वररमणा श्रीरामार्चित वररमणा श्रीरामार्चित वररमणा निधिरमणा 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 निश्चलतत्त्वा निधिरमणा निश्चलतत्त्वा निधिरमणा नित्यमहोत्सव निधिरमणा नित्यमहोत्सव निधिरमणा निरुपम शुभगुण निधिरमणा निरुपम शुभगुण निधिरमणा श्रीरामार्चित निधिरमणा श्रीरामार्चित निधिरमणा जय रमणा जय रमणा जय रमणा जय रमणा जय वरप्रदा जय रमणा जय वरप्रदा जय रमणा जगदोद्धारा जय रमणा जगदोद्धारा जय रमणा जीवन्मुक्त जय रमणा जीवन्मुक्त जय रमणा श्रीरामार्चित जय रमणा श्रीरामार्चित जय रमणा श्रीरामार्चित जय रमणा श्रीरामार्चित जय रमणा.
The following chantings are by Dhaval Trivedi and Vaishali Trivedi.
ओम नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय. श्रीरमणा चत्वारिंशत् श्लोक 21. जन्मस्थानमवाप्य गुप्तमहमो योऽभेदमाधूतवान् भूतानां चरतां पृथग्वितदियाम् आत्मैव यो भासते. देहं सर्वमिदं जगच्च विभवात् आक्रम्य यः प्रोल्लसत् एकस्तं गुरुमूर्तिमानमतरे लम्बोदरभ्रातरम्. Having arrived at the secret birthplace of the I, he has cast away the differentiation. He shines verily as the self of all animate beings, having distinct and divergent conceptions. He is resplendent as the one, seizing by his glory the body and all this universe. O ye men, bow down to him, the brother of Ganapati, the master embodied.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Sri Ramana Chatvarishat Shloka number 22. Antaryascha Bahir Vidhuta Timiram ज्योतिर्मयं शाश्वतं स्थानं प्राप्य विराजने विनमतामज्ञानमूलमुलयन् पश्यन् विश्वम् अपदे उलसिता यो विश्वस्य पारे परः तस्मै श्रीरमणाय लोकगुरवे शोकस्य हन्त्रे नमः. The meaning is, he is resplendent, having arrived at the eternal status of light, which chases away the darkness inside and outside. He strikes at the root of ignorance of those who bow down to him. Even when he perceives this universe, he is beyond it, on its other shore, shining solutions to such a one, to Sri Ramana, the master of the world and the slayer of grief. Like any other human being, he sees the universe and partakes in its dealings. At the same time, he is stationed beyond it, and so is able to remove its sorrows. As he is all the time stationed in the light eternal, darkness and ignorance are dispelled immediately. Namaste.
Our next reading is from Ramana Puranam on devotee Gambiram Seshaya by Surender Naganathan.
Gambiram Seshaya from Ramana Puranam. In Hinduism, the first function of the Lord is creation. To fulfill this, Arunachala Siva chose to create itself in the image of man in the form of Arunachala Ramanan, Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. For the second function, preservation, he sent boulders like Parni Swami, Mother Argammal, Ramana the Brahmachari and others to look after Bhagavan's body and his environment. The third function of the Lord's is destruction of ignorance through the teaching of the highest wisdom. This removes all obstacles to self-realization, including the I am the body notion. To accomplish this, Arunachala drew two intellectuals to Bhagavan, Gambiram Seshaya and Sivaprakasham Pillai. In fact, according to the Vedanta Chudamani, a Tamil book on Vedanta, which Bhagavan loved to quote, one of the most important duties of a devotee is the preservation of his master's teachings. Gambiram Seshaya came into Bhagavan's life for this function. Bhagavan once said, Gambiram is not his name. Gambiram is a title given to his family. His great-grandfather was serving a king and was given the title Gambiram, meaning majestic nobility, because of his uprightness. That became their family name. On the first or second day Bhagavan went begging in Tiruvannamalai. He happened to stop in front of a house where 4 people were gambling with playing cards. When, as usual, he clapped his hands for food, the house owner went in and shamefacedly brought out some food for Bhagavan. This man was Gambiram Seshaya's brother Gambiram Krishna Iyer. From that day, he never gambled again. Gambiram Seshaya, a government officer, was well read in philosophy. In 1900, he was transferred to Tiruvannamalai, where he heard of an ascetic Brahmin boy who lived in Virupaksha cave. Propelled by his own philosophical interests, he paid the ascetic, none other than Bhagavan, a visit. Just one glance from Bhagavan and Gambiram Seshaya was captivated. He saw before him in human form all that he had studied in the scripture and a reflection of the very truth he was seeking, the self. He had studied many books on yoga and philosophy, particularly those of Swami Vivekananda, and had many doubts. He brought these books to Bhagavan and asked him to review them and answer his questions. He assumed that Bhagavan was observing silence. Therefore, he always wrote his doubts on a piece of paper. Bhagavan gave his answers too in writing after looking carefully through these texts. Much later, Bhagavan humorously remarked, "They said I was in silence, though I never took a vow of silence. I never took a vow of fasting, Nobody shared food with me, so I was without food. Then they said, our Swami is fasting. Nobody talked to me, so I kept quiet. Then they assumed Swami is in silence. Do not disturb his silence. Gambiram Seshaya not only put forth excellent questions, but also requested Bhagavan to condense some complicated passages that he found difficult to grasp. Bhagavan did this too. Many subjects were discussed and everything was explained in the light and nomenclature of the Hindu scriptures. While some of these questions were based on self-inquiry, most were on different aspects of Hindu philosophy: yoga, sadhana, concentration, meditation, God, the world, ego, liberation, pranayama, and Ashtanga yoga. Of these, Gambiram Sheshaya was most interested in Ashtanga yoga. While Bhagavan did explain the intricacies of other paths, including the path of Ashtanga yoga, he never swerved from affirming Jnana Marga, the path of wisdom, as the direct one. In fact, Bhagavan has remarked that while yoga is like taming the turbulent bull of the mind by forcibly yoking it, the path of wisdom is like gently taming the bull by calming it with some grass and then yoking it. Gambiram Seshaya served to provide Bhagavan the opportunity to read books on yoga, philosophy, and other paths. With all this information, Bhagavan became like a university of philosophy. This was just as well, for he was to soon meet and compare notes with intellectuals like Kavyaganta Ganapati Muni, a scholar well versed in the Vedas. He was also to meet learned men of the other nations and religions, such as Paul Brinton, Frank Humphreys, and Dr. Hafiz Syed, the last an authority on Islam. Gambiram Seshaya served as a means of helping Bhagavan fulfill this function. Gambiram Seshaya was also instrumental in making the content of those slips of paper and notebooks with his questions and Bhagavan's answers available for future devotees, eventually published as Vichara Sangraha, the first book on the teachings of Bhagavan in Tamil. It was later translated in English and titled Catechism of Enquiry. Afterwards, its title was changed to Self-Inquiry.
Devotees from Seattle, Prabha and Keshav Vishwanathan, Sai Kumar Pollachi, Rajesh and Sridevi Peddibotla, and Surendra Nakhanathan would like to end these celebrations by singing Prapatti Ashtakam.
Ramanam prapadye, 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 Avartapuryam janitam prapadye, Pandyesha deshe vihritam prapadye, Shonachala prastacharam prapadye, Bhikshum tapaklesha saham prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Abrahmakitanta samam prapadye, Jitarishangvargamaham prapadye, Sarvagyata sarabhritam prapadye, Nissimakarunya-nidhim prapadye.
Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Asmat prapanchadadikam prapadye, Vishwadikokter vishayam prapadye, Kala graha graha bhayapanutyai, Kritanta shiksha kritinam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Ramanam prapadye, Vinetumartim vishayadvajanyam, Vijnanamurtim dadatam prapadye, कन्दर्पदर्पज्वरवारणाय कामारिलीलावतरं प्रपद्ये
रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये आजन्मवर्णीव्रतिनं प्रपद्ये कुण्डीभृतं दण्डधरं प्रपद्ये ब्रह्मासनध्यानरतं प्रपद्ये ब्रह्मात्मभूयं यतिनं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये हरं प्रपद्ये विचरं प्रपद्ये स्वतन्त्रताया सदनं प्रपद्ये अमेयसामर्थ्यवहं प्रपद्ये विशुद्धविज्ञानिवरं प्रपद्ये
रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये दौर्भाग्यतापत्रयकर्ममोह सन्तापहन्तारमहं प्रपद्ये यदार्धसङ्कल्पमपेतपापम् अवाप्तकामां विशुचं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये मनः प्रसादं भजतां ददानां मुग्धास्मितिलोलासिमुखं प्रपद्ये व्यतामशेषं वपनीयमोदा प्रधाननाम्नां रमणं प्रपद्ये
रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये शिवं प्रपद्ये शिवतं प्रपद्ये गुरुं प्रपद्ये गुणिनं प्रपद्ये मदीयहृत्पद्मजुषं प्रपद्ये शरण्यमीशं शरणं प्रपद्ये
रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये रमणं प्रपद्ये
प्रपत्तिं रमणस्यैतां तन्वतां तत्त्वदर्शिनः तत्क्रतुन्याय रसिकाः तत्तादृशफलाप्तये Handing over the celebrations to San Diego Center. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.